All right, so are you ready for this? We are diving into a story today that is more unpredictable than a 5-round fight in the octagon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're talking Dana White.
Ooh, wow.
The outspoken president of the UFC and his relationship with politics.
Interesting.
Specifically, his relationship with Donald Trump. And trust me, there are some twists and turns that you probably wouldn't expect.
This will be good.
Yeah. So how familiar are you with this whole saga?
I know the basics. Dana White, Trump, big supporters of each other.
Right.
But I'm ready to get into the nitty-gritty.
Okay, perfect, because that's what we're doing today.
Awesome.
So to set the stage, Dana White was a huge supporter of Donald Trump during the 2024 election.
Right. Very vocal about it.
Yes, very vocal. And now he's saying that he's completely done with politics.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
He's calling it disgusting and repugnant.
What happened?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to figure out today.
Yeah, let's unpack it.
So to understand this, we need to go back to the beginning of their relationship. They've been friends for years, but White's involvement in the 2024 campaign went way beyond just like a casual endorsement.
For sure.
Like he was a fixture at rallies and events.
Absolutely. It was practically a campaign fixture.
Yeah.
He spoke at the Republican National Convention, which is a massive platform, for any endorsement.
Huge.
And then there was that appearance with Trump at the UFC fight in Madison Square Garden.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, talk about sending a message.
Right. And it seems like White was really trying to bridge those two worlds.
Yeah.
Like the combat sports world and the political world.
For sure. And his strategy was interesting.
What do you mean?
Well, he wasn't just going after the typical voter.
Right.
He was laser focused on young men. The kind of guys who maybe aren't glued to CNN or Fox News every night.
Okay, so he was trying to reach an audience that maybe traditional campaigns weren't reaching.
Exactly. He saw an opportunity to tap into a different audience.
Like who?
The ones tuning into podcasts, like Joe Rogan or Theo Vaughn,
right.
Andrew Schultz shows.
Yeah.
Shows that have these massive followings.
Yeah, huge.
And often, they're dipping their toes into political waters.
So White saw that as a way to get Trump's message in front of those people.
Yeah, in a way that felt more authentic,
Less like a stuffy political ad.
Exactly. It was about bypassing those traditional gatekeepers of political information.
So he was using his connections to get Trump booked on their shows.
It was a savvy move, really.
It was?
I mean, he understood that these podcasts provide like a direct line to a younger and oftentimes less politically engaged audience.
Wow. So was it effective?
Hard to measure the direct impact.
Right.
But anecdotal evidence suggests it resonated with some.
Okay, I can see that.
Think about it. You're a young guy, maybe not super into politics, but you love UFC.
Yeah.
You see Dana White, someone you respect,
Yeah.
standing beside Trump, and then you hear Trump himself
Right.
on your favorite podcast just talking directly to you. Not some talking head on cable news. I mean, that's powerful stuff.
Powerful stuff.
It is.
So it really challenges how we think about political influence, right?
It does.
It's not just about those stump speeches and the TV ads anymore.
Exactly. This speaks to the rising power of influencers.
Yeah.
Especially amongst younger demographics. And White understood this,
Better than most.
better than most. He was tapping into a trend that's only growing stronger.
Okay, so White was deeply involved in the campaign.
Yes.
She had a plan, a strategy.
Yeah.
And arguably it was working.
It seemed to be.
So how did he react when Trump actually won?
Well, let's just say at the victory party,
Yeah.
White didn't hold back his enthusiasm.
What'd he say?
Oh, he said things like, "No one deserves this more than him.
Oh, wow.
This is karma."
Huh.
He was clearly elated.
Yeah, it sounded like a total victory lap.
He was all in.
He was all in.
Yeah.
But here's where things take a sharp turn.
No.
What happened next is what makes this whole story so perplexing.
All right, lay it on me.
So just a short time after that celebratory mood, White makes this dramatic announcement
What was it?
out of nowhere.
Oh, wow.
He comes out and he says, "I'm never doing this again."
He did.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't want anything to do with this shit.
Oh, my God.
It's disgusting.
Wow.
It's repugnant. So it's a complete 180 from his previous stance.
It is like he had some kind of political whiplash.
Totally what happened.
Yeah.
I mean, was this planned or did something happen?
Yeah. Did something sour his entire perspective?
We're going to dive into that right after this break.
Yeah, it's a question a lot of people are asking. And the truth is, we don't have a definitive answer.
He never really explained it.
Not that I've seen.
It's like one day he's on stage at the RNC And the next he's comparing politics to something you scrape off your shoe.
It's wild, right?
And what's even crazier is despite this dramatic exit from the political arena, White remains fiercely loyal to Trump.
Personally.
He even said, and I'm quoting here, Donald Trump is tougher and meaner than anybody.
Wow.
You can only pray to God to be a quarter of the man that Donald Trump was when a guy tried to put 7 shots into his head from a high-powered rifle with a fucking scope on it.
He really said that.
He did. It's a bizarre juxtaposition, isn't it?
It is.
He's totally repelled by politics as a game.
Yeah.
But he still seems to admire Trump the man.
It makes you wonder about the boundaries between personal loyalty and political ideology.
It really does. It's a head-scratcher, for sure.
It is.
You'd think if he found politics so repugnant, that feeling would extend to the person who was at the center of his political activity.
Right, you'd think.
But it doesn't seem to. And speaking of those political activities, there was a lot of buzz around White's involvement with the Trump campaign.
I bet.
Some people felt like he was alienating fans who didn't share his political views.
Sure.
Others questioned whether he was using his platform responsibly.
Right.
Did he ever address those concerns?
He did, in his typical no-nonsense style. You know.
What'd he say?
Well, he basically argued that he was exercising his right to free speech.
Okay.
That he wasn't trying to force his views on anyone.
I see.
He even said something along the lines of, if you don't like it, don't watch.
Classic Dana White.
Right.
So he wasn't backing down from his support of Trump.
Well,
but even if he wasn't forcing his views on anyone, there's no denying that his actions had an impact.
Of course.
Both on the UFC brand and on his fan base.
Right.
I mean, think about the optics. You
Right.
have the president of the UFC, this global organization, openly supporting a very polarizing figure.
For sure. That's bound to create some ripples.
Absolutely. And it's naive to think that those ripples wouldn't affect the brand in some way.
Totally. But measuring that impact is tricky.
Yeah. How do you even quantify that?
Exactly. I mean, we can speculate all day long, but without concrete data on viewership, sponsorships, and fan engagement, it's difficult to say definitively whether the UFC benefited or suffered.
That's a good point. It's easy to get caught up in the speculation and the hot takes.
It is.
But without hard evidence, it's all just conjecture.
Right.
But let's shift gears a bit
and
talk about the impact on White's fan base.
All right.
He has millions of followers, many of whom are young men who might not be deeply engaged in politics.
Yeah.
Do you think his support for Trump could have influenced their political views?
It's certainly possible, and this gets back to the power of influencers.
Right.
Think about it. You're a young guy.
Yeah.
You love MMA. You look up to Dana White.
Yeah.
You see him standing beside Trump, vouching for him.
Right.
Even putting him on your favorite podcasts.
Yeah.
It's bound to at least make you consider Trump's message. Maybe even see him in a new light.
So on the flip side, do you think his later withdrawal from politics could have caused some of those same fans to question their own beliefs?
That's an interesting point.
Like, if Dana White, this guy I respect, is now saying politics is disgusting, maybe I should rethink my own views?
Yeah, we often underestimate the impact that these figures have on shaping opinions.
Especially with younger people.
Especially when it comes to young people who are still forming their own worldviews.
Right, they're still figuring things out.
Exactly. And White's story, with its dramatic twists and turns, could certainly have planted seeds of doubt in some minds.
Wow, so it could be a catalyst for them to step back and critically examine their own beliefs.
Absolutely.
This whole saga really highlights the complexities of influence in the digital age.
It does.
It's not as simple as I endorse this candidate or I support this policy.
Right.
It's about the subtle cues, the unspoken messages, the way a figure navigates the political landscape that can truly shape perceptions.
It's a fascinating case study in how political influence operates in the 21st century.
It is.
It's nuanced, it's layered, and it's often operating beneath the surface.
Right under the radar.
But the impact is undeniable.
Okay, so we've talked about the impact on White's fan base, but what about the Republican Party? They clearly saw him as a valuable asset in their efforts to reach younger voters.
They did? How do you think they reacted to his withdrawal?
I imagine there was a sense of disappointment.
Oh, for sure.
Perhaps even a little panic.
Yeah?
I mean, they'd invested in White.
Right.
Put him front and center in their outreach efforts.
Yeah, and to have him suddenly step back.
And in such a dramatic fashion.
Yeah, it must have thrown a wrench in their plans.
Totally. It's almost like he was this bridge they were building.
To a demographic they desperately needed to connect with.
Yeah, and then just as they were about to cross it, the bridge collapsed.
That's a great analogy.
What does this say about the party's reliance on figures like White to reach younger voters?
Well, it exposes a vulnerability, doesn't it?
In what way?
They were relying on someone outside of the traditional political sphere to do the heavy lifting for them.
And when that person walked away?
It left a void.
So it raises questions about their ability to connect with younger voters.
On their own terms.
Without relying on the star power of these influencers.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered the impact on White's fans, the Republican Party's strategy, and this broader trend of influencer involvement in politics. But let's zoom out for a second.
Right.
And think about the bigger picture.
Okay.
What does Dana White's story tell us about the state of modern politics?
You mean particularly here in the U.S.?
Yeah.
I think it reflects a growing disillusionment with the political process itself.
How so?
Well, here's a guy who was initially gung-ho about politics.
Right.
Willing to put his reputation on the line.
Yeah.
For a candidate he believed in.
He was all in.
And then just a short time later, he's completely turned off by the whole thing.
Calling it disgusting and repugnant.
Right. That shift in perspective is telling.
It's like he got a peek behind the curtain and didn't like what he saw.
Exactly. But what does that say about the rest of us?
I mean, are we also becoming disillusioned with politics?
Is that what's happening here? I think there's evidence to suggest that's the case.
Like what?
Well, look at the declining voter turnout, the rise of political apathy, the increasing polarization, the distrust between parties.
Yeah, it feels like it's getting worse.
It does.
Yeah.
People are tired of the gridlock,
The lead slinging.
the constant negativity.
It's exhausting.
It is. They're looking for something different,
Like what?
something more authentic, something that speaks to their values and concerns.
And that's where figures like Dana White come in.
Right.
They offer an alternative to the traditional political establishment.
They do.
They're seen as more relatable,
More genuine.
more in touch with the average person.
Exactly. And that's why their influence is so potent.
I can see that.
They can tap into that sense of disillusionment and offer a different path.
A different way of engaging with politics.
Yeah. But the question is that ultimately a good thing or a bad thing?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. And I think it's one we need to grapple with.
As we navigate this new era of political influence.
For sure, Dana White's story is just one example
Yeah.
of how this dynamic is playing out.
But it feels like a microcosm of a much larger trend.
It does. It's a trend that's likely to continue as we move further into the digital age.
Where influencers wield increasing power.
And traditional political institutions struggle to maintain relevance.
Wow.
The lines between entertainment, celebrity, and politics are blurring.
And we need to be aware of the implication.
Both positive and negative.
Yeah, it's like we're entering this strange new world where the rules of political engagement are being rewritten right before our eyes.
It's happening so fast.
Exactly. So where does that leave us? We've got Dana White, this incredibly powerful figure in the sports world who goes all in on Trump, then dramatically pulls back, yet still maintains this personal loyalty. What does it all mean?
It's a tough one to unpack.
It is. We've explored his motivations. We've analyzed the potential impact.
Yeah.
But I guess the question is, did he ultimately do more harm than good, or vice versa?
That's so subjective.
Right.
It really is.
Depends on your values and your perspective.
Exactly. Some might say by amplifying Trump's message, he contributed to political polarization.
Right. Which is definitely not a good thing.
Others might argue that he simply exercised his right to free speech and maybe even encouraged more people to get involved.
Especially younger people.
Yeah, which could be seen as a positive.
Right. So how do you weigh those arguments?
Yeah, is there a right or wrong answer here?
I don't think so. It's not a simple equation. And I think that's what makes Dana White's story so fascinating.
Yeah, it's not black and white.
It's not. It forces us to think about these really complex questions about influence in politics.
The impact of our actions. You know?
Exactly, and what kind of society we want to live in.
It's like he's holding up a mirror to our political landscape.
Warts and all.
Yeah, and maybe that's the biggest takeaway here.
What do you mean?
It's not about judging Dana White.
Right.
Or labeling him as a hero or a villain.
I agree.
It's about using his story to examine our own relationship with politics.
Our own biases and how we engage in this increasingly messy world.
It's a call to action in a way.
I think you're right.
Be more informed, be more engaged.
More thoughtful about our roles as citizens.
Yeah, don't just accept things at face value.
Question things.
dig deeper,
challenge your assumptions,
and maybe find a way to have these tough conversations even when we disagree.
without all the partisan bickering.
Exactly.
Now that would be a real victory.
It would.
I think that's a good place to wrap things up for today.
Yeah, I agree.
Hopefully you found this deep dive insightful.
And thought-provoking.
And as always, we want to hear from you.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on all of this?
Do you agree with Dana White's decisions?
How has this whole saga changed your view of politics?
Hit us up on social media and let's keep this conversation going.
Because that's what it's all about, right?
Engaging with these issues, learning from each other.
Striving to be more informed and engaged citizens.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time, keep diving deep.